Hello, everyone. Just give us a 15-minute start. Can anybody hear me? Hey, hey, hey. All right. All right. I see some people have posted up on here. This is good times. Just to give everybody the background, we're going to go ahead and start at 3 o'clock. But at the same time, if you have any questions or comments, please put it down below. At some point in time, if not during the live streaming, we'll get to it afterwards. This is going to be a little bit more unconventional than other live streams. Other live streams wanted to have this big production or anything or like that. We don't do that. We're going to be raw, unfiltered. This is what part of the scene looks like. So you're getting the background look of it. But at 3 o'clock, we have some big issues that we want to address, especially when it comes down to Clayton County, its officials, its protocols and processes, which is has a lot to be desired. Let's put it that way. So pretty soon we'll have former sheriff, as you know, my brother, Victor Keith Hill, coming on the show, and we're going to go ahead and start in earnest by then. The man, the myth, the legend.
Good evening, brother.
How you doing?
I'm doing good. How about you?
Pretty good. I was just letting the good people of the world know how our live stream was going to go ahead and participate.
Awesome,
For
awesome, awesome.
we got going on up there. It's nice, easy, carefree conversation, but we'll get into a little bit more as we dive into the issues that are going on
Well, before we
in your.
dive into the issues, let's dive in the issue of that T-shirt. What's that about?
Not today, brother. That's what it says. Not today.
That reminds me
We're
of some
not
movie
having
I
that.
saw years ago where a guy was having a bad day. Of course, we know you too calm and collected for that. You know what I'm saying?
Uh, yeah, you're right about that.
Exactly. But
But I
T-shirts
wanted
do
to.
make a statement about the psychology of the people who wear it. You do agree, don't you?
Yeah. It does. It does. I ain't gonna lie. You sounded good there. Let me go ahead and get anybody to chat.
Okay.
How's he sound? How does that sound? So
Okay.
anybody who's on right now, could you just give us a thumbs up or something like that? Just by happenstance, I told them that we're starting the live stream now. And of
Okay.
course, at 3 o'clock, we'll start
3 o'clock,
with
we'll
the
start
nonsense.
business. Yes.
hmm Just wanted to make sure if everybody can hear us clearly.
What's the temperature like there in Miami?
Do you really want to know? Let me
Yeah, of
check out.
course, I want to know.
Oh, it's 79.
Yeah.
79 high winds of sand going. The pebbles are going into my eyeballs.
Wow.
Sorry about that.
Maybe I need to take a plane down there tomorrow.
Probably do.
Yeah, I think I will.
What's the temperature up there?
It's not bad now. This
Okay.
morning it was cold. You see, I got this long sleeve shirt on,
Okay.
but actually it's kind of warmed up. Yesterday was cold, and I should have flew down there yesterday, actually.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you that. I'll tell you one thing. This is about the time of the year I'll come up there comfortably.
Mm-hmm.
That you start thawing out.
Mm-hmm.
Because I tell you what, anything in the 60s now, in the 50s, I feel it. I feel it bad.
Not you, not the man that grew up in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, can you
Not the
believe
dude that was wearing short sleeve shirts and 40 degrees weather. What are we talking about here, man? You think I forget that stuff?
Yeah. Well, you know, it's just running around here day and night, and it's just beautiful.
It's warmed your soul, hasn't it?
It does.
That's good. That's
It does
good.
warm my soul. What? Not only the weather is incredible, but what you got oftentimes is, how can I say this, Keith, to come down here to live and to be able to run January through December and do whatever you want to do, and you're not held down by any type of cold, um, is a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I agree. But that may come up too, believe it or not, in the subject matter we got to talk about.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So we're good with that. What else is going on? We got some heavy stuff going on in a couple of 5 minutes.
That we
Y-
do.
y-
That we do.
Your
That
neck
we
of the
do.
woods are going out of order.
Yeah. Never a dull moment.
Yeah,
Never a dull moment.
yeah. That's for sure. That's for sure. Yeah. So that's what the shirt is about today for everyone out there. Is that you being the crime fighter. I'm not trying to have no nonsense today. It's just not today. Please don't trust me and don't try me on that
It,
end of it.
yeah, and that brings up something else. The last time
Well,
I had to FaceTime you, I almost dropped the phone. You had a Batman t-shirt on. What was that about?
you know,
Because you're the Superman guy. I thought maybe you saw the light, but I'm sure there was another motive behind that as well, too. Matter of fact, you got
sometimes
a
you.
movie coming out, don't you?
Well, it's in July, right? One of the images I saw in that movie was his getting his ass kicked. I wasn't too happy about that. So we'll see
Yeah.
how James Gunn does with that.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting. I thought the last guy
Yeah,
did pretty good. I thought he was very impressive.
yeah. I thought Henry Cavill is what you would consider. I thought he was the quintessential
Yeah. Y'all kind of look
person.
alike.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, of course, I'm gonna be always beholden to Christopher Reeves.
Absolutely.
Um,
He's the classic, yes.
right, and then we go into Henry Cavill after that. But we'll see how this guy may be able to grow on us. Who knows?
Hmm.
But as of right now, I think just because of the bad taste that DC left to its fans, we'll see how that turns out.
Okay, you sound like we're trying to do another podcast here, get on another touchy subject here. Another
We
touchy
might.
subject for us to disagree on.
Yeah. No. I guess your position is that this guy's gonna suck.
No, I don't have a position. You're the Superman fan.
All right, I'm
That's
gonna
why
tell
I
you.
was trying to figure out what you was doing with my t-shirt on the other day.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
I was
And
doing
I
what is
noticed
called
when the Batman versus Superman came out, I didn't get a call from you for weeks. I wonder why.
it's called ops. I
Yeah.
was doing I was doing oppositional training. That's what I was doing.
Yeah.
Heck yeah. So on top of that, Vic,
Mm-hmm.
with the great weather,
Mm-hmm.
you missed out last night on the incredible full moon. It was not a cloud in the sky, but the full moon cresting over the Atlantic Ocean while I was on Fort Lauderdale Beach. Jesus, it lit the moonlight lit up the entire ocean.
And
Incredible.
I'm supposed to feel good about this.
Well, yeah, I want
Yeah,
you
why
to
don't
feel
you pick me
good
up at the
that I was
airport
able to
tomorrow? Pick me up.
go
I'm gonna
through
get
it.
a plane ticket. Just pick me up at the airport tomorrow, man. And and this is
Uh,
another argument we had on the other podcast. I'm not gonna blow up your car. I should be a good shape, right?
you should be okay because I don't have a car, Keith. I have a bike.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Okay.
I don't want my car getting targeted at all. Please, people, please.
Right, right, right.
That's for sure. Oh my gosh.
Well, hopefully we'll find something to agree on today.
Your sister said hello.
Oh, okay. Give her my regards.
Kendra and
Yeah.
Angela's on.
Yeah. Tell
So
I give Big Brother a call sometime.
yeah. They said you're too Hollywood for them now.
Yo, right, right, right.
Congratulations, Keith. You're Hollywood now.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell her give me a call every now and then.
Yeah. They'll check up.
Yeah.
Yeah, they'll hit up. Yeah. So basically, I think you and I both know that at 3 o'clock, we're just going to go unfiltered. This is so different from the podcast in itself. And just for anybody who's paying attention to this, our podcast is altogether different than what this live stream is about. We're a little bit more unfiltered with this. And so you're going to see a different side of us both as we're talking about the issues at hand in this more raw and unfiltered portion of whatever subject matter we discuss. So that's where we're going to be at. You good?
I'm good. I'm good.
All right,
All
then.
right.
We'll
I
go
guess we're
ahead and
getting
make
ready to
it
get
happen.
started. Absolutely.
Yeah, let's go ahead and get it started on that. So we got a minute left.
Okay. How's
Let's
my
see.
niece? Well, my niece
Good.
is, but you know which one I'm asking about.
Yeah, they're doing good. They're doing
Good.
good.
Tell her to give her uncle a call too.
Yeah, they definitely will. I'm sure they will on
All
that end
right.
of it. All righty. Let's see what we got. All right, Keith, let's go ahead and handle some business right now, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. Let's get
All
serious.
right. All right. Welcome to our live stream of the Hill of Justice. I'm your host, Jerome Hill, and I'm here with retired Sheriff Victor Hill. Today, we're going to talk about the public trust and the criminal justice system after the disturbing events that saw convicted murderer Clayton Guzman, a man serving life for a brutal killing, just slip through the cracks of the Clayton County jail. His escape is a real-life failure of protocols, oversight, and according to the former sheriff, something deeper. So today, we're going to unravel Guzman's escape and his eventual capture. But we're not just going to stop right there. Who left the door open, literally and figuratively? And was it sheer incompetence or something more careless? So that's what we're going to look at. We're going to examine the inner missteps and, quite truthfully, the worst part of it, the haunting silence from those who should have spoken up, from correction officers to the command staff, someone who had to know, or at the very least should have known. So welcome, Keith. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, brother.
Hey, I have to go ahead and just pause this because I just want to let everybody know. Of course, my brother is Victor to you guys. I don't want you to call him Keith. Okay, he's Victor. All right. So I just want to let you put that out there, brother. Now that we got that out the way, we got some serious problems that was just brought to my attention in Clayton County. We couldn't do a live stream without getting your input about this situation because, of course, you were in a law enforcement executive.
Hmm.
So you bring a wealth of professional nuance to this, and quite truthfully, ran the most successful jail that the United States has seen. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the backdrop of what's going on. Naturally, we know Nathan Guzman was a convicted murderer and was waiting in the Clayton County Jail to be transferred over to prison at some point in time. I think what best will best take a look at what we're looking at is some news clips. I'm going to play these news clips for you. I want you to take a look at it at any point in time. Stop it if you want to go ahead and make a point, and just
Sure,
let me know.
sure.
And let's just go back and forth about what happened and what's your thoughts on it, and then how we can change the dynamics of this, because this was quite truthfully pathetic.
All right.
Where a convicted murderer was mistakenly released, says the sheriff needs to do better. Clayton Guzman was allowed to walk out of jail months after he was sentenced to life in prison. Channel 2's Tom Jones live in Clayton County tonight. And Tom, the victim's mother is concerned for her safety.
That's right, Linda, and that's because Guzman is from Florida, where she lives, and the sheriff here told me he believes he has traveled back to that state. He was convicted of murdering Christina Grayson's 19-year-old daughter. She wants to know how this happened 5 months after that conviction.
30 years. I expected him to live, eat, and breathe every bit of the 30 years in prison.
Christina Grayson was looking forward to Clayton Guzman serving every single second of his life sentence for murdering her daughter, Delilah. Instead, Guzman is free.
He's out walking free.
That's after the Clayton County Jail mistakenly released Guzman nearly 2 weeks ago.
How does this happen? How did this happen? How? I'm not getting a clear answer.
Sheriff Levon Allen told me it was the result of training and his workers not paying attention. He said workers looked at a court document that showed a motion to null pros, or not prosecute. The sheriff said if they had looked further, they would have seen a necrophilia charge was null pros.
Jerome, stop right there for me, please. Real important I bring this out. I know, of course, you were with Baltimore PD for years. There are people who know, but there are people who don't know. Necrophilia, for those who don't know it, is a person being charged for having sexual relations with a deceased person. That's very, very serious. I just want to make a note on that, but keep going.
And the jury convicted Guzman of felony murder and aggravated assault.
This shows negligence on the part of the sheriff's department.
The chairwoman of the county commission is not happy with the mistaken release.
We were not made aware of this at all.
She says the public should have been alerted, and the chairwoman reminded me of the suspected murderer mistakenly released from the jail last year.
We actually had that inmate here, and that inmate was let out.
Grayson is concerned Guzman could be headed back to Florida, where she lives.
I can't walk around without my concealed weapon. I mean, and I have to make sure I have that in my phone.
And Grayson says her husband took their daughter's death so hard that he committed suicide on the anniversary of her death. And she says this is just adding more pain on top of her grief.
The killer is on the run after
Jerome,
the Clayton County Jail.
There. One thing I do want to do before we get into this is I want to acknowledge the lady who lost her daughter and unfortunately had to go through this. And then especially hearing that she also lost her husband as a result of this murder as well. You know, running a jail is serious business. And you're not just responsible for the lives in that jail, but you put lives at danger if the wrong people get out. But before we get into the politics, before we get into that raw, you're probably going to see, and I want to talk about it, people using this as a way to make themselves look good so the next guy can look bad, or a way to make it seem as if though they're for the victims. And we need to address that as well too, because one thing that's very, very important, this one thing I don't want us to do, in full disclosure, I was a sheriff of the facility we're talking about now. I know the guy who's a sheriff in a political way, in a personal way. I know all of the players there. And the one thing I want to make sure that we're clear is, if we're going to do the blame game, all of this is not on him. And we're going to go through that. But if we're going to be fair, we got to talk about how we got to this. And all of that is not on him. A lot of it is, and we're not going to hold back on it, but all of it is not on him. And we're going to get into that as well, too, about how we got here. You know, you always want to see what is the catalyst of how we got here.
Right.
You know, if a person has high blood pressure, well, what's the catalyst? Is it cholesterol? Is it stress? Because if you get the catalyst, we've seen people come off of medication because of that. So we got to make sure we identify the catalyst of what happened before we just talk about what he did or didn't do. But go ahead.
County Jail mistakenly released him.
That's right. A sheriff's office spokesperson confirming to 11 Alive that Clayton Guzman is no longer in custody because their staff wasn't properly trained or paying attention. 11 Alive's Grace King joining us live from the courthouse in Jonesboro. So, Grace, one of the biggest concerns is that Guzman could be anywhere. Grace, why hasn't the sheriff's office put out any warnings about this?
Well, the spokesperson for the sheriff's office tells us that they didn't alert the public because they didn't want Clayton Guzman to know that they were looking for him. They said Guzman believes his release was the result of a higher power, that he might not be wanted for the strangling of his ex-girlfriend anymore.
Why would you wait 12 days to let the general?
Yeah, stop right there. And Jerome, I want you to weigh in on this. What's your thoughts about that as a reason not to tell the public that you got a killer that's loose from the jail? What's your thoughts on that?
Okay, so basically what we do as attorneys, judges, detectives, we do something called Socratic thinking. Okay, we ask a question with a question. And one of the questions that I have right on top of my mind is, why would somebody make a decision not to do that? I heard the answer. And the answer for some people would make them think, hey, that's pretty sound. And so the question was to why would you do that? The answer is because we did not want to tip him off that we were looking for him. Okay. Problem number one. He was released back in March. And there had been a whole slew of time that he was out and about. So you would think, okay, guess what? He is comfortable on that end of it. Then you started getting intel. First of all, you didn't know for a period of time. So I'll let you talk a little bit more about that. But at this point in time, that means, guess what? There's no crime that happened that's associated with him. Thus, you know, he's hanging low. That way we can go ahead and we can be secret squirrel and find him just like that. The problem is, this world is too big. You know, there's not a place that you can't get to the world with enough money in less than 14, 15 hours. Why are we not alerting the public? You absolutely alert them pronto, and I'll tell you why. The fact of the matter is that this person could have violated anybody else in any capacity, and it just heightens the awareness of the public in general. So if something is amiss, which otherwise they wouldn't think is amiss, now they're heightened in that capacity. I could not understand whatsoever why they would go ahead and make that decision. And I just thought that it just wasn't, there was not enough forethought in there. I think that on the surface, they probably thought, oh man, this is great. You know, we can go ahead and assail this. But I don't know if that makes any type of sense. If you're going to go ahead and in an abstract way, take a look at it and say, hey, guess what? We're going to filter certain things out. I don't get it. I don't care to get it. I would have just alerted the public, you know, but it comes down to this. Is this, you know, people are going to go ahead now and in the court of public opinion, was this a cover up? That's one. Two, we're going to have people to go ahead and say, guess what? Were you trying to go ahead and protect your own ass? That's number two, And number three, there was a lot of incompetence here. Could you not be able to tell where the issue was readily right after? And if that was the case, we need to hear more. And I'm going to have you go ahead and talk about this.
Sure.
Is how we can mitigate this from ever happening again.
Of course.
So that's my thoughts. Go ahead.
All right. No. That was good. I want to get your perspective on it. I agree with you. Again, we're not going to put everything we're about to talk about as a fault of the person that holds that position now, but we're not going to hold anything back. That was an asinine response and an asinine reason, and that could put people at lives at risk. You're an ex-narcotics officer, so we know there are certain things we don't release to the public because we don't want the drug dealers to know we're going to raid them at a certain time.
Right.
But when a killer is on the loose, that's totally different. People's lives are in danger, so they have to be alerted. Now with social media, now a system that I left in place is still being used. It's called Nixle. We had over 300,000 people on Nixle before I left the office of sheriff, which was more than I think the news channel that claims they have the most viewers at 6 o'clock is WSB TV. And at that time, years ago, they claimed they had 180,000 viewers then, which no doubt is probably considerably less now that more people are going towards social media. Well, we had more people than that. And anytime someone was wanted, especially someone a danger to the public, we immediately put that picture out because now you got over 300,000 eyes and ears that are seeing this guy's picture and looking for him. That's the purpose of that. The purpose of that device is not because you're having a Halloween party or your wife is having a town hall meeting or something like that. So that's something that should have been done immediately. Also, we want to note, full disclosure, I'm the ex-sheriff of that county, so I know a lot more in this incident most people would. That's not the first murder to be accidentally released. It's a total of 4, actually, that's been accidentally released since then. Now, all jails have accidental releases, but it's a totally different thing when murderers are accidentally released. So we'll get into that more. Continue playing. Let's let this play out.
Okay.
To let the general public know that this person's on the loose. You look at the case happened with the executive with the healthcare. When they put it out there that this guy did this crime, they were able to locate him because of eyes in the streets, eyes at these restaurants. People see people and they remember the stories that you guys put out.
I want to stop it right there because this guy is 100% correct. Because what you want to do is descend the resources of all law enforcement, public officials, and public safety as an entity onto finding out and getting this person 100% off the board. You brought up earlier in the video about necrophilia.
Yes.
And the disturbing nature or wherewithal you have to have inside you to compel you as a control mechanism to do that to a deceased body.
Absolutely.
We talk about young children being unalived, older people being violated, abused, unalive. Naturally, this is up there also, just to give some context with that. So this guy is 100% correct.
I agree.
We also heard from District Attorney Tasha Mosley today. She says she's in constant communication with the victim's mother, Christina Grayson, to keep her updated on this search. She hopes that he's captured quickly so that he can serve every day of his life sentence.
Please stop right there. Please stop right there. Okay. So remember I told you we can't put all of this on the guy who's the sheriff at this point. We got to look at the catalyst. What's the root cause? What's so interesting, that this reporter is going to say that the DA is in constant contact with this person. Okay, well, let's have an honest conversation about how the jail got in the condition it's in now. I don't know if we have videos that show some of the conditions of the jail. Um, Everyone's welcome to go to my Facebook page. It's just under my name, Victor Hill, where recently, while putting up advertisements for this show, we showed conditions of the jail, showed inmates literally taking over the jail, literally trying to break into the control room, chasing officers around, punching officers uh, for no reason at all, sucker punching and stuff like that. Well, how did the jail get there? Okay, for people who aren't watching, I'm sure we got some videos of what the jail was like before it got to this point, before murderers started being released, before uh, the jail became with a zoo-like nature like it is now. Well, we got to understand, I'm the former sheriff of the county. Why am I the former sheriff of the county? Well, the woman she just talked about, who was a DA, was a part of prosecuting me to get me out of office so a friend of hers could get elected. I'm not going to go too deep into that story. I think everyone knows I wrote a book about it. There's proof of it. There's witnesses and everything like it. And what they did was they attacked the way I was using the safety restraint chair and said that the way I was using it was illegal, which is not simply not true. That's the way the chair has been used. Based on that prosecution, that safety restraint chair is no longer used at that jail. Based on that prosecution, there's a lot of things that was done at the jail, the military boot camp, neutral of other things that are not done out of fear of prosecution from the woman that she just mentioned. So remember how I talked about catalysts, how, okay, a person may have high blood pressure, but what's the root of it? Okay, well, what's the root of this? That's how the jail got out of control, because we had a prosecutor to add to another crazy prosecutor we got in Georgia that's more concerned with prosecuting people they think can win re-election so they can get their persons in. And now what do we have? We have 4 murderers that were released from the jail, 5 people who've been killed in the jail, and absolute chaos in there. Let me read you an article that I thought was just it's just amazing to me. It says U.S. Marshal tracked down trained killer mistakenly released from the jail. This is a quote from who we have as a DA right now in Clayton County. And it says the convicted Georgia killer who was mistakenly released from the Georgia jail is now back in custody. The Clayton County District Attorney confirmed Friday. District Attorney Tasha Mosley confirmed that the U.S. Marshals who were recently enlisted to find Clayton Guzman after he spent more than 2 weeks on the run located him at his mother's house in Central Florida. Mosley added that she has no further information at this time. But then, as the article continues to go down, she says, I'm not happy about this mistake made by the sheriff's office employee, Mosley told 11 Alive. My staff work hard to get justice for the victim's family to make our streets safe, and we are just disappointed. So, it's so interesting how she's going to put all of this on the current sheriff when she's part of the reason why he doesn't have the tools to do the job anyway. Now, we're not taking the responsibility for the stuff he is responsible for, but you got to think about that. There was a person she failed to indict that got out of jail because she failed to indict him, and he kills a young woman in front of Lovejoy High School, kidnaps her and kills her. And had she done her job and not been concerned with trying to get involved in politics, that's another person that would be alive today. But let's keep going.
Grace King, 11 Alive News.
Everyone, I'm Linda Stouffer.
And I'm George Estevez. Thank you so much for watching. 5 months after Delilah Grayson was strangled to death and weeks after Clayton Guzman's mistaken release, U.S. Marshals captured him. Guzman traveled from Clayton County, where he was awaiting transfer to prison, down to Ocoee, Florida, right outside of Orlando, where he grew up.
I'm a little bit relieved that Mr. Guzman has been apprehended and in custody again.
Now she wants to make sure he doesn't go back to the Clayton County Jail.
Could a mistake happen again? Could he get...
She ain't wrong.
She's not wrong. I mean, yeah, she's right. Why would she want him to go back there when he could be released again? He was scheduled to go to state prison anyway.
Right.
So hopefully they're going to send him straight to state prison instead of sending him back to the Clayton County jail. Like I said, we can't show all the videos, but there's a lot of videos on my Facebook page and different social media. And to see the conditions of the jail is very, very disturbing. Now, full disclosure, so that people who aren't familiar with this podcast are not familiar with you and I, or my case, you know, this situation and the people I'm talking about, I know them. Like I said, the current sheriff is a person that worked under me at one point, and I actually assisted him in getting elected the first time. Okay. Before I went away to Arkansas on the false charges that was put on me for political reasons, I did that then. Once I came back and saw things that I knew were clearly mismanagement and things that I saw where I think people are going to start getting killed, and a whole bunch of people did, I backed off from that and I did not support him in that next election. So I'm going to have to take responsibility for helping them get there. I did that in order to stop her from getting the guy that she wanted in jail. And I had no idea it would turn out like this. When I realized what was going on and what was going on there, I was like, hey, I got to alert the public. That was a mistake. So I'm going to take that one on the chin. I have to take responsibility for that. Jerome, I'm going to have to give you some responsibility for this. I clearly begged you years ago to move to Clayton County and come work for me, because I said, hey, look, when I'm ready to put my my feet in the sand at the beach, I need someone strong enough to run. You already had your sand and your feet in the sand at the beach, and you refused to come. So I'm gonna have to put that responsibility on you, because I think if you came and you were the sheriff today, we might not be here on this podcast today talking about this.
You know, one of the things where I was concerned about when it came to that was working underneath you and me getting a use of force charge. That's what I was concerned about. You know, I didn't want to sully your reputation.
Right. And of course, I follow the Sun Tzu philosophy that you punish those closest to you. And we know my feet is certified by the EEOC as an equal ass kicking opportunity fee. Everybody gets suspended, whether you're a friend of mine or not. Let's talk about that. When I was sheriff and I ran a jail, everyone knows I handed out suspensions and terminations like the Easter Bunny handed out candy. There's a reason for that. It's not because I woke up in the morning and said I wanted to fire somebody or I didn't like particular people. And of course, that caused a lot of politics. This DA is friends with one of the people I fired, who actually tried to run for sheriff that she was trying to assist at that particular time. So, but there's a reason for that. When you run a jail, you have to run it with an iron fist, because if you don't, people start getting killed. Those people that I fired were doing things that could put that jail in immense danger. A lot of those people that I fired have been brought back to that jail since my absence. Think about that.
Yeah.
So during my tenure as sheriff, is the truth. We didn't have any escapes. We didn't have any riots. We didn't have drugs in the jail. Nobody was murdered in the jail. Did people die? Of course. The Lord calls people when he calls them. So people will have heart attacks or whatever like that. But as far as murders in the jail, we didn't have that going on at the jail. And that was because of the structure. And I think we're going to show some videos on how that went. So there was a reason that I was firing people consistently and suspending them consistently, whether I knew them or not, whether we were friends or not, it didn't matter. Because as Sun Tzu said, you have to be equal for rewards and punishments. If I don't like you and you do good, I have to reward you. If I love you and you do bad, I have to punish you, because we're dealing with life and death here. You know what I'm saying? So I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the issues we're dealing with and why this jail has gotten so out of control is a lot of people that I terminated were brought back. And we're seeing the results of that now. Right.
Yeah. And on a personal note, for Sheriff Allen, the personal interactions that I had with him, I owe him a great deal of debt. He helped me out on a personal situation. that you and him were able to resolve
Absolutely.
in a manner that was humane, given the circumstances, and really propelled us to really getting this gentleman into some help.
He
And
did.
so
He did do that.
and
Yes.
so on a personal level, shout out to him for that. But I think that your other point to that is that, hey, guess what? There's some issues, and as much as we could take the praise, we have to take the criticism too.
Oh, absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
and there shouldn't be a time where escaping from prison, it shouldn't be easier than getting into college.
I
That's it.
agree.
And so we have that issue. But Keith, I want to go back. Oh, Vic, I got to go back to what you were talking about earlier.
Sure.
And we were talking about the restraint chair.
Sure.
And I have a video that I want you to take a look at. And it has a lot to do with that. And I think that people really need to see this clip. And I want your reactions thereafter.
Sure. Sure.
Records request. To see a video where Sheriff Victor Hill records request. To see a video where Sheriff Victor Hill authorized the use of the restraint records
A little technical difficulty there.
request.
Okay.
Yeah.
To see a video where Sheriff Victor Hill authorized the use of the restraint chair. What we found was notably different. A federal investigation into the use of Gwinnett's restraint chair resulted in no criminal prosecution, despite deputies tackling, taxing, and pepper spraying inmates who were compliant at the time before they were placed in the restraint chair. In Sheriff Hill's case, he is shown talking to an inmate with no physical contact, and no use of force is seen used to place the inmate in the restraint chair. The sheriff in his case, however, was charged with 7 felonies. This might turn out to be the most blatant selective prosecution we've seen in recent times.
So, there's a lot of meat on those bones there, especially that last part of the video where you can see a guy being placed in a restraint chair. Let me give you some fun facts on that video. The person placing him into the restraint chair is the guy who's a sheriff now, LaVon Allen, that you just talked about, or that we were talking about. You also see this female, and if that video would have played longer, she goes and she continues to make sure everything is fastened and correct before the nurse comes to check. So let me tell you what's so interesting about that. That's one of the charges that I was charged with. You saw it's a stark difference with how Gwinnett County was doing what they were doing. And they were actually using force to put people in chairs. We didn't use force to put anybody into the chair. Okay. Notice I was the only one charged. So Jerome, did you see anybody in there that looked like they were afraid of me and I threatened them and made them violate the law?
No,
Of course not, because that chair was used like that all of the time. They use it far more times than I ever use it. They use it over 600 times. I'm only charged with using it 7 times. You see the female walking around there. Believe it or not, she was the one that claimed to be a whistleblower and claimed that, I got to tell on this. But if you watch that video completely, she's the one that's helping to put him into the chair. Well, the truth of that is that she was removed from the fugitive unit and the SWAT team for some incorrect behavior, and she got mad. And that's really, really, truly what happened. We weren't allowed to show the videos of what Gwinnett County did at my trial. We weren't allowed to bring up at my trial that the Department of Justice looked into that and did not indict anybody. But in my case, all of a sudden it became a jailable offense and you got to go to prison. We also wasn't able, well, this happened after the fact. That same U.S. attorney actually looked at a jail, the Fulton County jail, and admitted they were tasing people, beating people. And he said, but we're going to work with them just to make sure that they come in compliance and let them sign a consent decree. But of course, we know in my situation, we're not stopping at go and collecting $200. This guy has to go straight to prison. Well, we see the disparity there. And why is the disparity there? Well, the disparity comes from how did this all get started? It started as a result of a political campaign. The DA has been a political enemy of mine for years. She's always supported my political opponents, which is her right to do. But when you start using the criminal justice system as a way to prosecute somebody because you don't want them in office or whatever, that's when we get into stuff like this. And then to make matters worse, you make up a crime over a tool that was very important to keep the jail safe. That safety restraint chair, anytime we had someone that showed pre-attack indicators, they made threats, they did certain things, and we know they had the potential to do the type of things that I think people can go to my Facebook page and see today and see folks just striking people for no reason at all. None of that kind of stuff we had those type of problems with. You know, interestingly, and you got to see some of these guys because you came to my sentence and the prosecutors that teamed up with her to get this done, she was able to work with. I think what Brett Hops and Brent Gray, we need to talk about them too. They were able not just to lie to the grand jury to get an indictment, not just to lie to the jury to get a false conviction, but here's what they did that's bigger than what they did to me, but it hurts law enforcement. They made it seem that the preemptive use of restraints, which is done every day in law enforcement, you've done it, I've done it. Traffic stops, we put people in restraints and not under arrest. Search warrants, we put people in restraints and not under arrest. And we did it in a jail. It's a very good tactic that helps prevent these type of things from happening. And they took that and made that into something that was illegal. There's no case precedents out there or whatever like that. And now the Clayton County jail and other jails are afraid to use that tool preemptively. And what do we have as a result? Not one, not two, not three, not four, but 5 people killed at the Clayton County jail. Numerous stabbings, videos that just got posted on my social media where people are walking into cells and being assaulted. These prosecutors actually said at the trial, why couldn't these people just be put in a cell? Well, you can clearly look at these videos, what's happened since they stopped using the chair, and you see officers walking in to give them food, walking in to give them medicine, and all of a sudden they get assaulted. Why is it that they also brought up this other thing that's totally ridiculous, that you have to be actively resisting before being put in restraints. You could clearly see you could clearly see a video where this guy is being totally compliant, and then all of a sudden he strikes an officer. So when they come up with all of this craziness, just because they want to come up with a reason to charge someone for political reasons, this is what we get. 5 murderers released, 5 people murdered, riots, people refusing to lock down. Think of the lives that have been lost since this prosecution. 5. They claim they were protecting inmates' rights and they were so concerned about them. We know that's not true. We know it's related to a campaign. We could prove that. Again, a whole nother story that is written about in the book. But this is the cost of lawfare. And that's why I said we're not going to put all of this on the head of the current sheriff. We got to talk about the catalyst and how this started and the people who are behind it. When you see these people being released from murder, when you see these people getting killed in a jail, getting stabbed in a jail, when you see a jail that didn't have drugs and now is drug infested, people like Tasha Mosley, people like Brett Hobson, people like Brent Gray, that blood is on their hands. They're the reason for that. They're the subject matter experts on how to run a jail with a bogus prosecution. So they can sit back and look and see what their prosecution has done. And this is a problem not just in Clayton County, but across the country. We see law enforcement afraid to do their jobs because they're afraid of these type of prosecutors.
Right.
And just the catalyst of how we got there.
Right. Shout out to Cordell. I want to read out a comment I just posted. If you wait until actively resistance that somehow those officers get hurt and lawsuits are filed. Cornell is right. You know, if you wait for that type of resistance to come at you, it could be over. You don't know what type of skill sets they have.
Absolutely.
We still have a fiduciary responsibility to protect the correctional officers there, as well as the inmates. That's why I felt that it was all silly. It was it just wasn't. It was a waste of money federally.
Mhm.
And I just felt as though that if this was a problem that they thought that they needed to resolve in some type of manner, this was a civil matter. This was never a criminal matter. What happened to you and how that got perverted is the politics that you were dealing with down there.
Yeah, well, again, we're dealing with people who were willing to lie to a grand jury. Let's make sure we get these points out. There was never any complaints about our use of the restraint chair. There was never any lawsuits about the restraint chair until Tasha Mosley got with these guys and came up with this prosecution. Never did that happen before. Even the judge at my sentencing, and you were there, she admitted, you unlike most cases we get, you did not assault anyone, you did not hurt anybody, and we don't even see a lawsuit to this up to now, the ones pending against you. Here's another fact that people don't know. All of these so-called victims that came up, they became victims after they initiated this. They did not complain. They went and solicited these guys. They went and saw them and said, hey, you were in a restraint chair, you're a victim. Then all of a sudden these guys get this bright idea, oh, really, can I sue? And some of their charges were dismissed on some of them. We haven't confirmed all, but we know, like the guy that we just saw, his charges was dismissed, and he's a very dangerous individual. So you collude with criminals, people who have beaten up old women in stores, elderly people in a wheelchair, pulling their hair out. Another one that one we just looked at, ran a woman off a road, threatened officers, dug holes in his yard, threatened me. And you collude with them and make them think that they're victims and tell them they got an opportunity to sue. And now this is what we get. We get an out of control jail. And again, you were there, you saw these prosecutors. I mean, if you look at that table, it looked like this movie I saw years ago, Revenge of the Nerds. It's ridiculous. These type of guys need to be removed. The U.S. prosecutor that was over this, he resigned immediately when a new president came in. And I'm hoping that the head of the DOJ will find these other two clowns and get rid of them as well, too. These folks literally lied to a grand jury, told them that these guys urinated on themselves. We can prove that didn't happen. You can look at the video and clearly see no water on the ground under them, nothing like that. It wasn't until they contacted these guys that suddenly they said, I urinated on myself and I'm injured. Isn't it amazing that you get in touch with 7 individuals who did make a complaint, got out of jail? Some had been out of jail a whole year. And ironically, all 7 of them, out of the 600 people that had been in the restraint chair, all 7 of them urinated on themselves.
Yeah.
Which we know is a lie. And I write about it in this book in a particular section called Urination of Lies in this book right here. They go ahead.
No, I wanted to ask you with the Guzman situation.
Sure.
How do we stop nonsense like that? Like how would you take a look at this? How, if you were to go right back on the chair again, what are you doing?
Okay, well, let's go back to some of the politics behind this. Remember, and I don't apologize for this, I handed out suspensions and terminations like the Easter Bunny handed out candy. Why? Okay, let me tell you something about these so-called accidental releases. This is a yin and yang to that. We have officers that are so slack, they will accidentally release the wrong person. Then we have officers that are slack, and they will keep people in jail that's supposed to get out. So I had to do what I've been accused of for so many years, rule by fear and intimidation, which is not a bad thing, okay, because we're dealing with people's lives. I had to explain to my staff that if you accidentally release people from this jail, I'm going to accidentally release you from your job. Just that simple. I need you to pay attention, because if the wrong person gets out, then people get killed, they get raped, they get robbed or whatever like that. With the folks that were keeping people in jail, we would find situations where sometimes a guy was held in jail 10 days longer than he was supposed to. Those folks, for every day those people stayed in jail where they should have been paying attention, they got suspended. So if you kept the man in jail 10 days longer than he was supposed to, you got suspended for 10 days. That's 10 days he might could have found a job, 10 days that he might could have done something to help his family. So when you run a jail, it has to be ran with an iron fist. It's not the type of environment where we can just all hold hands and come to a consensus and make it a win-win situation, which is very, very unrealistic. Another reason you have to run a jail with an iron fist is this. If you don't, my iron fist has to be just as hard on the guards as it has to be on the criminals. Why? Because if you don't, you get drugs, you get cell phones, you get contraband. Inmates can't magically float drugs inside the jail.
Yep.
It has to be brought in by officers. Sometimes there are other employees that do it. Sometimes it will be a nurse. Sometimes it'll be a maintenance man. But usually it's done by guards. They have to have the fear of God in them and know that if I get caught doing this, most of the folks was not going to try that with me anyway. But then I also had to put mechanisms in place that made it close to impossible for someone to do it. You know, drugs you got to treat like you're raising a toddler. When you have a toddler in your kitchen, you take the bleach and you put it where he can't reach it. Well, how I handled drugs in Clayton County was I made it hard for people to sell drugs. You can't sell drugs if I got a marked vehicle sitting in front of your house. You can't sell drugs if I have a road check by where all the people come through. So you got to also put those things in check. So there's a reason a jail has to be ran with an iron fist. Another thing that you can't do at a jail is this. You know, I think there's this thing out there that there's not enough people to work in the jail. That can't be true because there was enough people to work there when I was there. And there's been people added. When you hire people who's supposed to be in the jail, you got to keep them in the jail. You can't hire your friends and say, okay, I'm going to hire you in a correction position, but make you a chaplain. Or I'm going to hire you in a deputy position, but you can do massages for people. Or I'm going to hire you in a correction position, but you just take pictures. When you do stuff like that, you're taking away valuable manpower that should be in the jail. And then the people who have to work that jail don't have enough backup. And now when they get in a situation, it puts their lives in further danger. I hope that answers your question.
That does answer my question. And of course, you're dropping tea all over the place right now.
Well, yeah. But I'm not going to hold any bars back. And on the good and the bad, because you did mention something, and that is true. He did a good job with that one. He did. This craziness here, there's no excuse for.
Right. I'm just saying that right now we just entered into the world of shots fired.
Right.
I see you, Cornell.
Right.
So I just wanted to go.
I wonder if that's the Cornell I know, but go ahead.
Yeah. So, we have that going on. So I want to ask you about the jail as it's constituted. And we definitely know that we have levels of security for each one of those inmates. That we know that some of them are more difficult to deal with. So I'm assuming, and I'm going into your executive mind right now, that we have a exclusive pods for them or areas for them to be at, murderers and so on. Are they separated? Because I would just want to give people out in the world an idea of how the jail is structured, and thus how could something like this happen other than the fact of what was told in the media?
Well, the system that was there when I was sheriff, I'm not sure what the hell's going on now, but the system when I was there is anyone that committed violence had to wear a red uniform. So that way officers instantly knew they were dealing with someone that was capable of violence. Because you don't wear across your forehead, I'm a serial killer or I commit necrophilia. Nobody can look. If you look at this guy, how can you look at him and know that? I mean, the DA even said something about he's a trained killer. He knows MMA. I'm not sure if she would know a trained killer if one popped out the toilet and bit her on the butt. But how do you know that? You can't see that. So you look at these particular people and you put them in that particular thing. So officers already know I'm dealing with someone that has the potential for violence. I think the best thing we could do at this point for people who aren't familiar you can go on my page right now and see the condition of jails in now. Do we have a video you could show of what the jail was like, and the type of control we had? Let's play that now, and that might could answer your question. Then I could point things out as you go. Okay, stop 1 second. Stop 1 second. Okay, I know this video here. Okay, what you're looking at is a young man. His nickname is Too Tall. This video shows him in another jail that's in Atlanta, the Fulton County jail. Then it shows him when he came to my jail. So you're going to see the difference in that. The person that made this video thought it was very interesting when he went down in the jail and saw Too Tall in our jail and saw what a nice young man he became when he had structure and military potential, and the potential he had. So this here is a good video. I'm glad you got it. This video is not a shot at Too Tall. I think this is a shot that shows what can happen with young men if they're given structure and they're dealt with in a strict but fair manner. So I want you to watch how he acted in Fulton County and the type of violence he was doing, and then watch how he acted when he was under a military jail where we used the restraint chair preemptively, and see the difference. Now this is my jail. That's my jail.
Okay, this
Keep
is your
going,
jail.
and that's
here.
Too Tall. Right. That's Too Tall. He's right there.
I see it
Okay,
there.
go ahead.
Don't disrespect my rules. Yeah, I'm a college physical arm.
And you can keep it right. I'm just going to talk. He's in one jail stomping a guy. He's in this jail keeping it clean. And we need to talk about the cleanliness too. Let's stop right here a second, because right now the Clayton County jail is not clean. They have a bed bug problem, which is worrisome, because we actually, in an adjacent jail in Fulton County, they actually found someone deceased being devoured by bed bugs. Okay, why was my jail so clean? Because we got more than enough manpower to clean it. The inmates can clean it. All they got to do is clean their area. And that's 90% of the job right there. So you got one guy here that he's in another jail with no structure, and he's stomping people. He's in this jail making up his bed, going to attention. What's wrong with that? And you and I don't agree on much. Do you have any problems with that?
No, I think that this is great discipline.
Absolutely. So you got young men learning how to stand at attention. You got young men making their beds. You got the military discipline. You don't have all of this chaos of folks running around, sucking punch in offices and stuff like that. And that was the structure at the Clayton County Jail. This is the stuff where folks are talking about, oh, he was so mean and look how he treated them. Is making someone face the wall and stand straight up or whatever. What would you rather have, that or 5 dead bodies like they have in the jail now? Keep going.
Keith, while I'm here and I'm looking at this video, can you explain to people who are the individuals wearing orange jumpsuits and the ones who are wearing the white jumpsuits?
Okay, white jumpsuits mean inmate workers. Orange jumpsuits mean medium security. Red jumpsuits, like I said, is high security. They've had charges that we know deal with violence, aggravated assault, armed robbery, rape, murder, etc. So that right there gives you the color-coded difference. Now, inmate workers are required to work and clean the jail, but we required under my administration everybody to work and clean the jail. There were, and I think we'll probably see it, me doing cell inspections to make sure that the jail was up to a clean level. Let me tell you how important that is. It's very, very important, because you got so many people in jail, you can get staph infections. You can get more than bed bugs. And that type of stuff is dangerous, not just for the inmates, but to the staff as well. You know, interestingly, when they prosecuted me, you know, they wanted to act like they were protecting inmates. They weren't. You know, now what do you have? A jail full of filth. You got inmates getting stabbed, assaulted, raped, whatever. People, when they have loved ones in jail, want to know that they're not going to get stabbed. They want to know they're not going to be extorted. That's another problem in Clayton County Jail now. There are people extorting people's loved ones, making them cash app them $500. If you cash app us $500, we won't beat up your son. First of all, how do they even have a phone to get cashed app? And that's what has happened here. But keep going.
No, I respect.
Stop 1 second. Stop 1 second. So you saw what he was saying in that video. He said, I run this jail. So the jail he was in before, he said he ran it. Then you hear him saying, hey, there are no gangs in Sheriff Victor Hill's jail. In this jail, I do as I'm told. Is there anything wrong with that?
Not at all.
Right. But according to that Revenge of the Nerds, Deaths of Prosecutors you saw that day, this whole thing was just something terrible that they sold to the jury, and they added lies to it as if they're saying that guys couldn't use the restroom. Lie. Guys weren't checked on. They were checked on every 15 minutes. Lie. These guys were injured. Lie. If they were injured, why, when they got out of jail, did they not go to a hospital, or why didn't we have a report of it then and there? All of that. And then your jail that had this type of structure went from sugar to you know what. So another thing I want to say about Too Tall's in that other jail said, I run this jail. Okay. Well, now the inmates run the Clayton County Jail. If you look at the last video posted on my social media, you have the sheriff, the current sheriff, actually saying they run the jail, because he says that when his officers go home safe, it's only because inmates allow him to go home safe.
Let me
So
stop you right there.
Yeah, stop me. Go ahead and take over from here, please.
Let me stop you right there. When Sheriff Allen said that, I stopped in my tracks. Nobody's going to dictate to me. If I'm here to protect your life and others, that somebody else that is running amok and is in an inmate is going to tell me, and it gives me the permission structure to go home safe. That's my responsibility. Not only is it my responsibility to go home safe, it's my responsibility to make sure that you're safe as an inmate.
Absolutely.
Now, we can make this any way you want to. If you're an inmate and you want to do some harm to me, that's what they make hospitals for. And Keith, you know how I feel. That's what they make morgues for. We can go one or two ways. You're already in the jail, so you took that option out. So there's one of the two we can do. So that's why when you have a restraint jail, is to protect individuals from seeing one or two of those places, the hospital or the morgue.
Brother, let me stop you. I agree with you. I agree. But before we talk about that, remember the type of prosecutors we got here in Georgia and Clayton and Fulton County. They're probably looking for a way to indict you right now just for seeking that. You know what I'm saying? And see, and I say that to make a point, even though it's true. Okay. They set the stage for this. Again, we got to be fair. How did this all get started? You got a clown prosecutor here in Clayton that said, okay, just putting a person in a restraint chair is wrong. Did she really think it was wrong? Of course not. She was trying to interfere with an election. And then we see a lot of that going on in Atlanta. I mean, if you see the type of things officers have been prosecuted under that DA there, and we all know about her trying to interfere with elections, it's crazy. And this is what caused the chaos. If we go back to the Atlanta riots, I've got friends with APD. It's not that APD is not capable, they weren't capable of handling that riot. They were held back because of these political prosecutions, these political decisions. And I write a lot about it in the book. You know, even when they lost an 8-year-old girl, it was a situation that was very, very clear that I contacted them about and say, hey, we got these guys doing armed road checks and it needs to be stopped. And they were going to stop it, but they were stopped from doing it.
Mhm.
And then next thing you look, they get in a shootout and they kill an 8-year-old girl. I'm not going to go deep into that. It's all right here, but I'm going to say this. That's the catalyst of how the jail went from what you're seeing right now to being like the jail where you see the young man too tall acting out. Inmates will only do what you allow them to do. They're like kids. If you keep order, they're going to be in order. If you allow them to take over, they're going to take over. And they have taken over. And you know, and we got to talk about a call to action on this because he's conceded. You know, once you show weakness, the jail and the streets are not the place to show weakness. Because if they smell weakness, it's like shark smelling blood. And they already have. That's why they feel comfortable bringing drugs in the jail, why they feel comfortable bringing cell phones in the jail, why they feel comfortable punching officers and attacking them and throwing urine and feces on them. Because they see the doors open now. They smell the weakness. So what's going to happen at this point is there is a resolution. I mean, what he's probably going to have to do or should do is find someone strong enough to run that jail.
Mm.
That's the only thing. And there are people out there. You got like take Bernie Couric. Imagine if he talked to him and got him. What he did with Rikers Island was phenomenal. He needs somebody strong enough to come in and run that jail because now that he's conceded to that, now that he's gotten on TV and started crying, no, these killers are not going to take him serious from this point on.
Right.
And there's no way to get that back now. So you've got to put somebody in charge of that jail. And you get you know, a lot of people don't know this. The Fulton County Sheriff actually did that. We got to give him kudos. He actually hired somebody strong enough to run the jail. But there's a second part to that.
Was that Sheriff Labatt?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You're
Shout out
lookalike,
to,
by the way. Yeah.
Sheriff Labatt.
So he actually hired somebody strong enough to run the jail. He said, hey, I'm not strong enough to run the jail. Let me bring in someone who can. But this is what he has to do. And this is what Levon will have to do if he takes that same wisdom. You just can't hire someone strong enough to run the jail. You got to let them do what needs to be done. You got to let them fire who they need to fire, even if it's your girlfriend, even if it's your best friend or whatever. You got to let them move the appropriate amount of people into the jail it takes to man it, not talk about I need more people. There's enough people there. You got to put them in the jail instead of letting them run off and do everything else besides working in the jail like they're supposed to. That's what it's going to take at this particular time. They're going to have to bring in somebody like the guy that they brought in at Fulton County, Jarrett Gorlin, or somebody like Bernie Couric. And you bring in some folks that know what they're doing, but then you got to leave them alone and let them do what needs to be done, regardless of the people they're dealing with are people that you like or you whatever you are with them. That you got to let them do what they need to do.
All right, brother, let's go ahead and play this still.
Okay. Jerome, stop 1 second. Stop 1 second. You see how many red uniforms are there? Right. Those are your murderers, your armed robbers, your rapists. That's the type of control we had by implementing military tactics. Do you see anybody there looking sad like, oh my God, you're abusing me? Most of these guys never got a chance to go in the military because of the crimes they committed. you'll be surprised. Not all, of course, you can't lock up people and fire people and they love you, but you'd be surprised how many I have heard from that said they appreciate it, the ones that turn their lives around. But those are some of the most violent inmates in the jail. They wouldn't have red on if they weren't. Now, I want you to pay careful attention to what you're about to see happen. Stop. Okay. The Clayton County Jail now has problems getting inmates to lock down. They're popping the locks, they're coming out. Same problems we've seen in other jails. Okay. We had a lock problem when I was sheriff. I wasn't worried about no locks. If I say don't come out, they ain't coming out. Don't worry about the locks. Worry about me. Okay. When you have that type of discipline and control, don't get me wrong, we were working to fix the locks. But even though those locks weren't working properly when we were there, they weren't just running around doing what they wanted to do and insulting each other and running each other's cells and stuff like that, because we had that level of control. For my critics, not that we really give a damn about critics, but for them that talk about he ruled with fear and intimidation, I would like to see them rule a jail without fear and intimidation. Obviously, that's what's being done now. What do we have? 5 dead bodies and 5 releases of murderers. 1 that has yet to be caught. Keep going.
Now do it. Now do it. Jerome Good job. Thank you, sir.
All right, so I know we don't have any of those videos that's on my Facebook page where inmates are striking officers just out the clear blue sky, no warning or whatever. But for all of the people, including those revenge of the nerd prosecutors that came up with this crazy case, a lot of them were always talking about he made inmates face the wall. Okay, there's a reason for that. When you go to my Facebook page and you see all of these people sucker punching officers, and we didn't even get to the stuff where they throw urine and feces on people, that was a control mechanism. Also, it stopped them from masturbating in front of females, exposing themselves in front of females, and stuff like that. Also, notice I'm doing inspections. I used to always do surprise inspections at least 2 to 3 times a week. I would just have someone flip a coin. I'd have someone pick a number 1 through 8 and then pick a number 1 through 6. And then that's why I would do the inspection, because we had 8 housing units and then there were 6 sections in each housing unit. And then check to see the cleanliness. And that's what you got. When you do the inspections, when you're hands-on, when you lead from the front, you'll know if there are bed bugs in your jail or not. So everyone knew when I came through, everything better be clean. And that's just not the inmates, that's my staff. Because if the inmates didn't have it clean, then that means that they weren't doing what they were supposed to do to make sure the inmates were keeping it clean. If I walked in a cell and I saw writing on the wall, I knew my officers weren't doing their cell inspection. Because if we took the time to make the inmates take all the writings down off of the walls, how did one get up and you not see it if you're actually doing a real cell inspection? Cell inspections are very, very important. That's how you catch things, even medical stuff. I mean, how do you know? You need to make sure people are alive. We had a situation where a person had been in a cell deceased for at least 8 hours. Well, someone had to get fired for that. You didn't check him. You didn't make sure he was alive. You just looked and thought he was sleeping. No, a cell inspection is a cell inspection. Is there anything on the wall? Is there anything out of place? And then this stops inmates from having the time to make shakes because they're constantly being monitored. That's why the jail has to be ran so strict. That's why I was handing out suspensions and terminations like the Easter Bunny hands out candy. Because if you don't, you get chaos. and chaos is what we have now.
Well, Keith, I mean, Vic, let's put it this way. Another way that you could check for bed bugs is put a very light-skinned person like me in the cell. I lay on the bed for about a second or two, see if I get tore up. So just want to let you know that.
Make sure you send the sheriff that suggestion.
Okay, I will. I'll put it in as a comment public couple box. I'll just put
Right.
it in there. But you know, on a serious note, we were talking about intimidation and what that does. And all we're talking about for everyone out there is psychological warfare. And when you deal with individuals who are trying to intimidate you, trying to rearrange your thought process to put you in some type of fear, they've done that to the public already. That's how they've been able to do half the things they've done.
True.
You know, running a jail, being a correctional officer, any type of law enforcement officer, you know inherently that there is a group of people that exist out there that are trying to dominate and control you, because that is the pantheon of their success, dominating you. So when that gets challenged, when that power structure gets challenged by someone, most times they break down. But some of them, they like the excitement and the challenge. Well, guess what? If you're that person that's getting challenged, at least for the inmate or for the suspect or whoever is trying to do that, you need to have somebody with that equal type of strength. What I'm saying is, you can't have a sheep run a jail.
True.
You need a wolf to run a jail. That is plain, simple, clear. And there's a lot of families right now that have people in their lives that are no longer there. Inmates, families that wish that type of discipline was going on in their cell or in their prison, so their loved ones would have had a chance to come home. And that didn't happen. So this is part of a little bit of what you were trying to institute in your jail.
Yes. Thank you for that, brother. You know, the sad part about it is, you know, you got all these jail experts. You got all of these clown prosecutors like Tasha Mosley and Brett Hobson and Brent Gray. And you hear them say all of these things like, you know, you got to treat inmates like humans too, and whatever. And they're just saying stuff because they're trying to get on TV or they've got some type of objective. What I would like to see is them run the jail. Well, let me take that back, because that would put further people's lives in danger. More people would get killed. But it would be interesting, since they're such experts on how to run a jail and on what shouldn't be done, when clearly my policy said you could do it, when clearly we receive training every year from the Georgia Peace Council that says you can use preemptive restraints in order to restrain people, just like we do a search warrants and traffic stop. It would be interesting to see what their answers are, because based on what they did, this is what we got. And Jerome, I wish we were able to show some of those videos. I know we're at the end of videos, but if you go to my Facebook page and you see the things that these inmates are doing, there's one of them where they actually have on waist chains and they're still taking over. They're trying to enter the control tower. And my heart goes out to those officers who are there and whose lives are in danger. And it's sad because a lot of tools have been taken away from them because of the clown prosecutors that we just brought up. And you know, and that's why I've always been a fan of what we call Citizens Academy, because one thing we get to do in those type of things is we get to educate them on what it's really like to be an officer. We put them in training scenarios where, okay, how would you handle it? Because it's easy to just look at a film and say, well, I would have just shot the gun out of his hand. Well, anyone that's really dealt with situations like that, no, that's the Lone Ranger. We hadn't seen that since the show The Lone Ranger, which I used to
Right.
like, by the way. Right. But they get a realistic view when it's okay, arrest this guy. And let's say he doesn't let you arrest him. And they get to understand what it's like to try and put handcuffs on a person that don't want to be handcuffed. And the hardest one, as you know from being a cop, is that 90-pound female that says she don't want to be handcuffed.
Yeah.
That's worse than the guy we were talking about, the big dude that we did the podcast on last week. So it gives them a chance to see what's realistic. But when you got these Monday morning quarterbacks at that prosecute officers for political reasons, and it would be interesting just to see them run to jail if it wouldn't put more people's lives at stake. The truth of the matter is they would be too afraid to walk inside that jail.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, first of all, most people would be afraid to just put on the badge anyway.
Absolutely. And
Right.
kudos to the people who still go to the Clayton County Jail every day and have to do the actual job,
Yeah.
because they don't have the backup they deserve. Because
Right.
a lot of those positions have been given to friends and family so they can do whatever they want during the day, while you got one officer in a housing unit facing that danger. And like I said, we're talking about the problem. I don't like talking about problems without talking about solutions. And I want to say again, the solution to this problem, as I see it, is like you said, it takes a wolf to run a jail, not a sheep. They got to hire a wolf. I'm not going to sit here and talk all this stuff. Hey, let's recall, let's do this and do that. I mean, unfortunately, he has another 4-year term. So, what can save lives now? You got to put a wolf in charge of the jail,
Right.
and you got to let him do what wolves do. If not, more people are going to get killed.
Right. Right.
And and we're fortunate that our officer hasn't got killed. And we don't want to put, we don't want to say, well, as long as the inmate's getting killed, it's okay. It's not okay for anybody to get killed. But at the trajectory it's going on now, those officers' lives are in danger. The nurses' lives are in danger. If you look at a video on my Facebook page now, you see an officer opening up a cell so a nurse can give medicine, and then a guy just immediately punches him and attacks him. And you see the nurse is afraid and trying to run, trying to back up because she don't know what to do. Their lives are in danger as well, too.
Yeah.
But then you got these clown prosecutors talking about, well, if you think a person is dangerous, why can't you just put them in a cell? I would like those clowns, those Revenge of the Nerd clowns that you saw that day when you came to my citizen. I would love to see, Brett Hobson or Brent Gray walk in a cell like that. But then let me not say that. That would be a travesty because we know what would happen. They wouldn't be able to stand up and handle it like we saw that officer did. That officer was holding his own. Thank God.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the other part that we need to go ahead and bring out to everyone too is this, that a lot of people right now who think that they can do this type of job don't know until they get into close to the seat that, hey, guess what? It's much more and than just going ahead putting on a badge, gun, or even a stick for some people. What type of intestinal fortitude do you have to protect yourself, but more importantly, to protect others? Are you willing to make the the ultimate sacrifice to go ahead and save people? Sometimes what it looks like is being super confident that you're going to be able to get through an incident. That doesn't mean that you can't be afraid. You can be afraid, but there's a word that I want to tell everybody about. It's called courage. You have to go ahead and still do your job. And if you have courage, you can be afraid, but you're still doing what you need to do to persevere. Unfortunately, we have a lot of people who don't have that type of courage. And on top of that, they're quick to go ahead and judge people who are in positions where they have to have courage. And so the only people that really can really judge are people who have the courage to go and let other people know, hey, guess what? This is what it would take to do A, B, C, and D.
True.
You didn't do that. You know, that's that's the job. That's the nature of the job.
You're right. You're right about that. And I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I tell you this, it's a sad situation there. The catalyst is sad. We see it across the country. We see it, and of course, I was a victim of it. So we've seen other people be a victim of it. Even there was a situation in Clayton County where one of my deputies, he shot a guy in a courtroom, and he was indicted, and they were trying to send him to prison for aggravated assault. The guy didn't die, and the sad part about that, and I know that gets me, is this: even though it was a good shooting, and they had to admit it and release the charges, which I was very happy for the deputy. But at the end of the day, my deputies had shot 4 unarmed men by the time this happened. 3 of the unarmed men that they shot were white males. It wasn't until this deputy shot a black male that there was a need to indict him. That's how crazy this DA's office in Clayton County is, and how crazy she is. And, how is it that my deputy shot 3 unarmed white males and they weren't indicted, but then the deputy that shoots an unarmed black male gets indicted, and the deputy was black? But then they had to look at it and realize it was really a self-defense situation. Well, why? It was because of political pressure. It was because we got to do something. Okay. And when you get prosecutors like that, you create an atmosphere where folks become afraid to do their job. And it was a situation where I had to reassure my deputies, I got your back. And how I handled that situation was reassuring him that, hey, look, you can't work as a deputy, but we found something for him to do until eventually the charges were dismissed. And it's not just what's being done to law enforcement, it's what's being done to everyday people when you get these clown prosecutors like the one we got in Clayton and the one we got in Fulton. When we had an unfortunate situation that everyone was upset about. A young lady's running around a track. She unfortunately expired. And of course, people were concerned about the fact that the coach's man had her running was too hot. My condolences to her family. And we understand that may be a wrongful death lawsuit, but our DA actually indicted these people for murder. Do we really think that these coaches sat around? You know what murder means? It means malice of forethought. It means I plan to kill you. Did these coaches really sit there and say, is she dead yet? Is she dead yet? I'm sure they were just as upset and devastated as everybody else was. And if these DAs, these clown prosecutors, and I'm not just talking about party clowns, these are circus clowns, that's a higher level. When they do stuff like this to the public, when they do stuff like this to law enforcement, it creates a domino effect. And a domino effect is what we see at the Clayton County Jail. It's what we see, like what we saw what happened in the city of Atlanta during the Atlanta riots. There was actually a video I saw that hurt my heart where an Atlanta officer got out the car and the guy told him literally, get your ass back in the car and get out of here. And you know what the cop did? He got his ass in the car and got out of there. Was it the fear of him, or was it a fear of the politics and the Roberts Ford syndrome clown prosecutors that we have here in Atlanta? You see what I'm saying?
Right.
And that's why it's so important that I really look forward to see what the head of the new DOJ does to come and deal with these clown prosecutors, to get rid of more of them. Like I said, the one we had as a U.S. prosecutor resigned, Buchanan, and I hope they get the rest of them, because if they're allowed to continue this, we just don't get people falsely convicted, but we get the chaos that we got now not just in the jail, but in the streets.
Yeah, I got a question for you. It's a little
Sure.
bit of a personal nature, but it's
Sure.
for the world to hear.
Yeah.
If an organization came up to you right now
Mm-hmm.
and said, we'd like to contract your services,
Mm-hmm.
how would you handle that?
If it's a contract that's lucrative enough to stop me from playing all day like I have been doing, I'll take it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, here's the next one.
I'm enjoying this temporary retirement. You know what I'm saying? I know it's temporary, but you know.
Yeah. So, would you go back as sheriff?
You know, it's interesting you should say that. Let me tell you the honest answer to that question. Even though it probably sounds like some violence going on here. I said it before, I'll say it again. There was a little lady that asked me to come to her house so I could sign her book. She bought my book, so I went there and signed it. And we just sat there and talked for a little while. And she's an interesting character. So in the course of that conversation, you know, she started telling me, she say, you know, the drug dealers are back over there, the ones you ran off. And you know that crazy guy that used to do such and such, he's sleeping in a car over there and everything like that. And I said something to her that I should have never said. And I regret saying that. I said, well, you know, I said, listen, you're retired. And I said, why don't you just move? And she looked at me and she said, I can't afford to move. Well, remember this. Those are the people that hired me to be the sheriff. They're the ones that made me who I am today. They gave me that badge. That badge wasn't given to me by a mayor or whatever. That badge, when you're the sheriff, that gold star badge is given to you by the people of Clayton County. I will always be indebted to them. If they truly need me, once this case is resolved in the Supreme Court, of course I'll come back. Hopefully, if that happens, you'll come so I can continue with my plan of playing in the beach and you can take it from there. You know what I'm saying?
Then I'm getting prosecuted, Keith.
Well, if we got that clown prosecutor we got now, remember we talk about this the catalyst. You know, remember we said call for action. So we said instead of criticizing him, let's see what he can do. Well, he needs to bring in someone to run the jail because it's obvious he can't. But Clayton County needs to also get rid of that DA.
Sure.
Because as long as she's there, she's the reason the county is in the state it is now. If you want to look at the root cause, you know, she's the cholesterol or she's the stress that is going to cause the stroke that we see coming. So get rid of her. Hopefully he'll get someone strong enough to handle the jail because he's already admitted he can. He's already been on TV crying and already talked about the inmates running the jail. So that's it. So he could do that. And if those two things are done, who knows? You know, maybe there is no need for a return, and who knows? And then we're not saying that there's not somebody else out there that's strong enough. Like I say, he brings in a Bernie Couric or a guy like Bernie Couric runs for sheriff, then boom, that's it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Well, you still have the support of a large majority of the Clayton County residents.
And I'm very grateful for that.
And they would definitely love to see you come back and to bring some order, not only to the jail, but also to the county at large. I think that a lot of people, some of the things that I've been reading on Facebook and other places is that there has been a precipitous drop down of some nonsense that's been going on in Clayton County. It's for the reason why we're doing this, to address those matters. And the fact that, you know, you haven't been given any interviews to the press. So let's talk a little bit about that. Your process with that, why, and how you keep on with this moratorium on that.
Oh, absolutely. Well, you know, and again, I write about it in the book. I think it's called The Press, the Prosecutors, and the Robert Ford Syndrome. I'm glad you brought that up too. Because remember how I said we're not going to just blame everything on the guy who's the sheriff now. You got this catalyst that the DA and clown prosecutors like her. Then you also got the press. Okay. So you got to understand a lot of leaders are terrified of both. The press, we can also add to this clown prosecution from this clown prosecutor because they only reported one side of it. You know, it's hard to get a fair trial when you're being prosecuted in the media and they're not even putting out the other side. You know, the media never did a story saying that none of these guys made a complaint. None of these guys claimed anything happened to them until they were contacted a year later and say, hey, you're in the restraint here. You're a victim. You want to testify against the sheriff? Of course they do. They're criminals. You know what I'm saying? So, and they didn't investigate that stuff and they didn't put both sides out. And so talking to people like that is a waste of time, especially when they're going to take certain things you say and misconstrue it. Fortunately for us, social media has taken things to another level where we don't even need the media anymore. They're almost obsolete. And I've heard them say that. I mean, they're complaining about podcasts like the one we got because more people are tuning in to podcasts than them. One of them literally said at a meeting not too long ago that a friend of mine was at, that they wish there was something they could do or legislation because they're tired of seeing people do in their living rooms what we went to school to do. Well, you went to school to lie, if that's what you're talking about, because when you put out false stuff and you put out things that can cause something to go where it's not supposed to go, that's where you get there. I think that law enforcement should communicate directly with the people where everybody can see it. But when you have that medium in between you and the people, then they can twist the story. And that's what they did in my case and twist the story. By time, let me tell you how bad it got, Jerome, before my trial. The media actually would play a story about the restraint chair, and they would show another jail and show a deputy tasing a guy while he was in the chair. First of all, that wasn't even my jail. Number two, nothing happened to anybody in the restraint chair. They were checked every 15 minutes by officers, and they were checked by a nurse before they got in the chair and checked by a nurse after they got out of the chair. Anyone who said that they were injured by me or my officers is lying. I wish you could be at these depositions because remember, lawsuits only came after they came up with this bogus charge.
Oh, I know how
And
that
I
goes.
wish you could be at these depositions when I outright call these people in the attorneys, "You lying," and watch how they stutter because they know they're lying. Nobody urinated on themselves. Nobody was injured. We just watched the video, and to watch these people get a conviction off of a lie, to watch these people trying to extort the county out of money over a lie is very, very interesting. And it all goes back to having the wrong DA in office. So when you put the press and these prosecutors together, you come up with what I call the Robert Ford syndrome. And you end up with Robert Ford syndrome prosecutors, Robert Ford syndrome media people. And who is Robert Ford? Robert Ford is a guy that shot Jesse James in the back and killed him. Why? Because he thought that by shooting him, it would raise his status, that he would become Jesse James. Well, nobody knows who he is because people still ask me who he is to this day. Probably the most press he got is being in my book when I refer to as the Robert Ford syndrome. Well, you got these prosecutors that they hope that by prosecuting high-profile people, that it can take them to the next stratosphere. And it doesn't. Even the one that got public attention out of it would be the one in Fulton County. And what is she getting public attention for? For being involved in a bunch of foolishness while the county's getting raped, robbed, and murdered. If all the time she spent trying to get into politics, she was actually going after the criminals, we wouldn't see all of these killings and crime we see in Atlanta. So I'm glad you brought up the media. And that's why I made a decision over a decade ago that they were a waste of time and to concentrate on fighting crime and ignore them. A good crime fighter, Jerome, has to be like a good boxer. When you're in the ring boxing, there's people yelling for you, yelling against you. And you got to tune all of that out, and you got to concentrate on knocking your opponent out. And you got to tune it out to the point, but listen to wisdom, listen to the trainer in there, and only hear him and don't hear the other people. Everything else is just a bunch of noise.
Right.
And as we know, lions don't lose sleep over the opinions of sheep.
That is so damn true. I mean, I've never done that. You know, over the course of my career, I've been sued to the tune of $107 million because of these. And it was always impressive that over the course of my career, that not one single person was shorter, thinner, or weight less than me.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, why am I bringing this up? It's about a mentality. How you're going to go ahead and persevere through the negative. And even, I don't even care about the positive feedback that I get either. I could care less about that. But it's particularly the negative. It kind of like fuels you to do more. And, I knew I was always on the right path when I would go into civil court and have to explain my actions
Hmm.
about what happened. And it was always great when I got to sit up and they saw how big I was compared to the people on the other side of the chair or the table, and they stood up. And it was always a great way to show the illustration of what we're dealing with in terms of what people perceive as being like myself and like you were too. If you didn't know my case or didn't know my story, you would think I was 6'3", 300 pounds, just beating up on people. For you, of course, the biggest, baddest sheriff in the United States is taking advantage and violating people's civil rights left and right, and that wasn't even the case. So you still have to do your job regardless. And you're just taking away the noise, the background noise, and just pushing it to the side. And that's what a lot of people appreciate about your leadership is the laser focus that you had to do your job. And that's all you cared about, the job. Let's go ahead and do the job. But it's going to bring all types of critics left
Of
and right,
course.
and we embrace that. That's part of the shoulders you have to have on that type of level, because leadership, it can be very lonely by yourself, and you know how that goes on that.
Let me say this before we get off the air. I had the privilege of riding with you when you was a Baltimore PD, and that was one hell of an experience. I appreciated the show The Wire even more afterwards. But let me say this. It's very interesting. It was obvious. What was that sector you were? Because it was the worst one in Baltimore. What
Yeah, I
was
had
that?
to East Baltimore.
Right. Well, it's interesting how those guys knew when you were working and how they were very cautious. They were very, very careful to find out when is Jerome Hill working. And of course, you said something interesting. You brought up something about the lion, and I want to say this. Why is the lion the king of the jungle? It's not because he's the biggest. That's the elephant, the and that other animal, the hippopotamus or whatever. He's not the fastest. That's the cheetah. And he's certainly not the tallest. That's the giraffe. The lion is king of the jungle because of his mentality. That's why he's the king of the jungle. And I just think it's very, very important that we I want to encourage leaders to recruit people who have the lion mentality.
Mhm.
It takes a lion to walk the jungle. Not like you said, jails can't be ran by sheep. It has to be ran by wolves. You can't send Boy Scouts to go catch killers. And you can't have Boy Scouts or giraffes or sheep Monday morning quarterbacking the wolves when they're dealing with other wolves that are dangerous to society.
Mm.
So I think you brought up a very, very, very good point there.
Yeah.
It doesn't have anything to do with size. It doesn't have anything to do with race. It has to do with command and control.
Right. Right.
And that has to exist in order to maintain control of a jail, in order to maintain control of the streets. Again, I hope we're not getting too far off because I know we're here to discuss how this young man got out of prison, and not just him. We didn't even get into the other three that got out. I mean, two were on loan from Fulton County for murder. One fortunately turned himself in. One, as far as we know, I think his name is Shaka. No one has heard or seen from him again. Right after my suspension, all of these murders being released happened after this prosecution was initiated by Mosley. And not too long after that, we had another guy that had warrants for murder out of Miami that got out. And the deputies actually got in a shootout with him when they went to bring him back into custody. Interestingly, the way he was allowed to be let out of the jail is he exchanged armbands with another inmate. And when the people in IA interviewed the other inmate and asked him, why'd you do it? He said that the guy offered him some money, and he said, we figured we could get away with it because the sheriff is gone now. So I'm not saying that to say, hey, whatever, but I'm trying to make a point. Call it what you want, fear and intimidation, call it whatever you want. There is no way there's going to be order. There's no way that jail can be ran without that.
Yeah, I think you're right on that. And just for the people that don't know me, most of the time you're going to see me on live streaming. I'm going to be kind of like doing something like this. But when I get really let's put it this way: when I get laser focused on talking about things that are particularly interested me, you're going to see a concentration level that is huge, and it's going to be overwhelming. And so I pull back a lot on that. I know a lot of people were making some references about hearing a little bit of my story and so on and so forth.
We need to do
At
a
some
show on
point in
your
time, we'll
story.
do that.
Yeah, we really need to do a show.
We'll
Yeah,
do
that's
that. A
that's a
live
whole
stream.
lot. That's a very interesting story.
Yeah, well, we'll go ahead and go into that.
Right.
But for the sake of this live stream, I think we just get back to we're happy that Mr. Guzman has been apprehended.
Yes, we are.
And for the mother, my heart goes out to you. I mean, not only did you lose your daughter, but you lost your husband. That's unbelievable, unimaginable pain. And I just can't imagine that.
Yes.
That's just the one thing that we wanted to go ahead and do. But I wanted to bring out some points in this live stream with Victor that other people may have not heard, a train of thought that maybe gets lost in translation, whether in the book or something that's aside or away from our podcast. Our podcasts are generated for the world, as opposed to these live streams where we can be a little bit more surgical in what we're doing. And what we want to go ahead and put out there too, and Victor will co-sign this, we want to thank everyone who participated today. Subscribe, and please, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. We had so many people comment left and right. It was hard for me going back and forth. So I apologize
Awesome.
if you see me looking at the computer and then looking back at the camera. But all of you have made this live stream a success. Keith, let's put it this way. All these people have been commenting. I've been throwing it up on the screen, but they are loving you, wanting you to come back. I mean, it's return, left and right. If you could go ahead and say a few words to those individuals that came on the stream and wanted to wish you well and agree with your viewpoints about the jail.
Also, you know what? I'm glad you said that. I think this is a good time for me to thank Clayton County. It was 2004 that Clayton County took a chance on a young homicide detective and elected me to be sheriff. And that was the greatest honor in my life. And I just want to thank everybody. They've always supported me. Anything that you've seen never came from the people. It always came from political enemies, elected officials like the DA, the chairman, all that stuff that we hadn't got into, but it's all in the book. But the people have always had my back, and I appreciate that. And it was the people that gave me that gold star, nobody else. Even when this situation came, that's why it came, because people like Mosley and the clown that she was trying to help get elected, Jeff Turner, they knew that the people would vote for me and not for him. So they had to find another way. And that's what you see in situations like that. So the people have always had my back, and I just want to thank them. They made me who I am today. Let's see how things turn out. Hopefully somebody will take take that. Maybe the guy that's there now will hire somebody that can get it done. But I will always love everybody in Clayton County. Clayton County is my home. I plan to always, my address will always be in Clayton County. And that's another conversation that we'll have, because that's my home. Those are my people. Even though I plan to spend some significant time on overseas in a cruise ship very soon,
Right.
when that's over, I'll be back in Clayton County. You know what
Yeah,
I'm
and I
saying?
want to piggyback off that too, Victor. I want to go ahead on a personal note. Um, when those matters occur and happen to Victor, it affects the family too. And Clayton County, you have been nothing but gracious. Your true colors have shown the whole way through. You know, when things went south, you were right there with all types of support. Um, in many instances, while I'm in Florida, many of you would go ahead and either text or send me a message on my social media accounts, um, giving me a heads up about what's going on. I appreciate you, Clayton County. You guys are a class act over there, and you know although he's my big brother, you know, on my end of it, I've always knew that he had a class of people that he worked with that had his back, and the citizens that had his back too. So I really want to give out a huge shout out to all the residents of Clayton County. You guys are something else, and you guys are the best. I just want to go ahead and say that.
They are, and I'm never going to leave Clayton County. And
Yeah.
so, be it whatever capacity that's in, if I have to return, I have to return, or maybe they just need my help to make sure they get a decent DA and who knows, you know, a decent whatever that they don't have right now.
Yeah. Well, let's go ahead and wrap up this live stream, Victor. We did, and we came, we conquered. We needed your perspective on especially what happened last week. And we're going to go ahead and do a little bit more of these in the future. We'll notice you guys about that. But for those who haven't subscribed yet, please do. For the many, many, many individuals that commented today, thank you so much. We really appreciate that. And please go to our page on YouTube, like, subscribe, comment, even on our old comment. That always helps the algorithm. And we really, really, really appreciate. Any final words?
You talk about me?
Yeah.
Yeah, be ready to pick me up at the airport tomorrow night.
Sure enough, Fort Lauderdale Beach. Here we go.
There you go.
All right. Take care,
brother.
everyone. And take care and be safe.
All right. Take care, Jerome.
All right.
See you tomorrow.